Oil, meantime, as we've said, hitting its highest level since 2008 today. Tom Kloza from the Oil Price Information Service says this is the most serious oil crisis in our lifetimes. Tom joins us now along with CNBC senior national correspondent Brian Sullivan to talk more about it. Tom, so the most serious energy crisis, you think, in our lifetimes. Does that mean that, higher prices, essentially don't bring out a new supply? That, in other words, we've repealed the rules of what represents a level where finally we're going to destroy demand and it's going to correct itself?
Well, I hope we get higher supply here in the U.S., and we are going to see more supplies from Guyana, Brazil, Norway, and some others. But, there seems to be almost kind of a gentleman's agreement not to exploit the resource too much because people have been through these boom and bust cycles. The Russian oil, 9, 10 million barrels or whatever you want to call it, Europe is the one that's desperate. Europe is desperate for that oil. And we keep talking about a ban or some sort of act of Congress or whatever, but the way it is right now is there is a de facto ban on Russian oil for most of Europe, with the exception of Germany. And we're even starting to see that in Japan, and we'll see it in the U.S. It's not insignificant, the amount of Russian oil we import, but it's not as significant as Mexico or Canada or some of the real big trading partners.
Well, this is what I think is important to try to focus in on, because if there is, Tom, essentially a de facto near ban on Russian oil right now, then it's not reflected in the price. That supply is simply not there. So where is the price headed if we have to be in this situation for a little while? Are we basically just going to, kind of curtail demand, and that's the only way out of this? Or can we find an equilibrium before that?
That's the real big question. I've said this many, many times, and I adhere to this view that we don't measure oil statistics, particularly internationally, with precision instruments. It's like cutting your hair with a chainsaw. So we don't know if the world is using 3 million barrels more per day of oil or 4 million barrels or whatever. We know it's being depleted, and we know we're going to need more oil. But we don't see anything necessarily to replace the Russian oil anytime soon. Now, there will be demand destruction. The banks will tell you you're not going to see demand destruction until you see $5.25 gasoline and $180 a barrel crude oil price. If that's the case, we're probably headed into recession, my belief, which we found out in 2008, the last time we had numbers that were equivalent. And the kind of silent killer out there that really isn't being talked about and has been the product that's moved up the most recently is diesel fuel. You don't care about it unless it's a fancy car, but it fuels inflation in every nook and cranny.